Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. Today, we have an updated idea of the forecast as we close out December and work into January. We have updated January outlooks for you all today, and we will touch on some of the key trends that we've been seeing over the past couple of days, some pretty substantial colder trends as we close out 2025. And I want to start out here with the last 30 days because I want you to remember how this map looks, because it's going to continue to look very familiar as we roll things forward into the new year. This is the last 30 days in terms of temperature anomalies across the United States. You can see we've averaged out well below normal across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Ohio Valley, much warmer than normal across the western part of the country. If we take a look at how data has trended over the past couple of runs for the week 2 time frame between the 29th and the 5th of January, you can see very similar in terms of where these colder trends have been happening. We're seeing a persistence in the forecast for what has already been going on, and I think that that will be a theme as we go into 2026. Now, there's going to be some ups and downs, which we will talk about. We'll break that down for you all, but I do think when all is said and done, where we've been the past 30 days, where we go into the new year probably will be pretty similar. Here's a look at just the overall trend for the 29th to the 3rd of January. So day 9 to 14, 3 days ago. You can see here the forecast 3 days ago was much warmer than normal across really much of the country outside of the far northeastern United States. Much above normal with this forecast across parts of the plains. Look at how this forecast has rolled forward on the EPS 3 days later. This is the latest run that came in last night. It has trended substantially colder across the Ohio Valley, across the Southeast, across the Mid-Atlantic. This is a substantial shift towards a colder pattern for the eastern half of the country as we close out 25 and head into the new year. In fact, it's one of the bigger changes that you will see in such a short amount of time, only 3 days between these two maps. So just a huge change that has happened in the data over the past couple of runs. And I don't disagree with it. In fact, this is something that we thought would happen, that we talked about would happen back several weeks ago, that there would be a transition back to a colder pattern into the new year. That is very much on track as things stand right now. And as we go throughout this video, I want to break down why this is happening and whether it will continue to happen as we head further into January. One reason is our global wind state. Global winds looking to continue to be negative really as we go throughout much of the month of January. Generally speaking, this allows for some blocking, allows for higher pressure to develop in the high latitudes, and it allows for colder shots of air further down to the south and to the east. But it's not the be-all end-all. I think to get persistent cold, we also need our tropical forcing and the polar vortex to cooperate, which is what is now starting to happen. I think that part of the reason that we are dealing with this warm-up as we head through Christmas is our tropical forcing, the MJO, it died off. It weakened for a time. It went into the circle, what we call the circle of death here in terms of the MJO, out of the colder phase 8. But what we are starting to see happen is some emergence in phases 1 and 2 over the next couple of weeks, eventually into phase 3 and into phase 4. Why is that important? Well, you take a look at the phase 1 analog with our weak global winds. It tends to favor warmth west, cooler air east. Pretty similar to what the data has been doing in terms of trends over the past couple of days. You roll that into phase 2, you can see more notable cold, and I think if you combine these together, looks a lot like the 29th to the 5th time frame in terms of the current forecast data on the EPS model. In fact, if you combine these together, it looks very, very similar to the current data. And so certainly support for the trends that the EPS has been seeing. I think as a result, the American data guys, GEFS specifically, too warm in the week 2 time frame. I would watch for additional colder trends. And frankly, I would not be shocked to see the cold air trend even more intense, especially in this region in the northeastern part of the country, for a couple of days to close out 2025. Before we get to that, though, we will be dealing with a pretty big warm-up. I want to talk about this here because the temperatures as we head into Christmas Eve and into Christmas Day, record-breaking warmth across parts of the central and southern tier of the U.S. This is as we get into tomorrow, high temperatures. All the circles that you see, guys, indicate record-breaking warm high temperatures. How about 80s throughout much of Texas, into the upper 70s, even into southern parts of Missouri. We've got record-breaking warm highs all the way into southern parts of Indiana. That will continue all the way through Friday and Saturday before we get a cold shot of air that starts to come in as we work into Sunday and into Monday. Why I think that this cold could potentially continue to trend colder is because the vortex, the polar vortex, looks to split at 50 millibars, which is going to allow for us to tap into a lobe of the coldest air on the planet. Whenever I see this happen, it's a signal to me that data will probably continue to trend colder. I think that's one of the reasons we've seen such a drastic colder trend over the past couple of days. And guys, this is what we've been talking about, is when the vortex is in the right spot, near the Hudson Bay, we will have the ability to tap into cold air as we go into the extended range. That is exactly what is happening as we close out December and start out January. If we take a look here at just the overall temperature anomalies to break this down for you all, you can see how crazy warm it's going to be as we head throughout the latter part of this week. How about 20 to 25 degrees above normal across the central and southern part of the country. But look at the cold shot of air that comes in as we work into Monday and into Tuesday, guys, much below normal temperatures for the eastern part of the country, and a reinforcing shot of cold air as we start out the new year, probably lingering out through the 4th or so of the month. And then look at what starts to happen. We do start to warm back up. The big question here, okay, is this just fake on the data again? It's been wrong so far. Are we actually going to warm up this time? The answer to that, I think, lies in what's going on with our tropical forcing and how the polar vortex evolves as we work over the next couple of weeks. Certainly going to be moving through these colder phases in the short term, and while I suspect this model, this is the PWAMA, the Australian model, is a bit too fast, it is indicating a progression through MJO phases 3, 4, and 5 as we work into January. That's important because if you look at those 3 phases historically, they're warm. There's no doubt about it, guys. And if we move through these phases, there's probably going to be a time in early to mid-January where the pattern warms up. Now, I suspect that these analogs are a bit too far north with the warmth. I suspect they're further south and west in reality. But I do think that there's support for a milder pattern for a time across a good portion of the U.S. between, let's say, the 5th and the 15th of January. And I know that's something that Michael's been mentioning in some of his videos. I don't think that it locks in for the rest of the month, though. It's a 7 to 10 day time frame where we warm up. I think if there's a risk, it's that it is a shorter time frame, more on the 7-day time scale rather than 10 days, because as we work back into phases 6 and 7 into the Pacific Ocean, we should offer up a colder back half of January. There's also support with this idea from the polar vortex. The vortex, as we close out the first week of January, does retrograde up to Alaska. Guys, if you've watched our videos over the past couple of years, anytime I see the polar vortex move up to Alaska, that is not a good sign for cold in the eastern part of the country. And so, again, this does support the idea that southern and eastern tier of the U.S. for a time can probably get warmer. I definitely think that there's a milder period in here. It's not just going to be straight cold to start January and cold all the way through. But I do see signs that it can come back further south and east down the line. By about mid-month, the vortex, the lobe of the vortex, shifts back towards the Hudson Bay, which would open the door for us to tap into that colder Arctic air with any storm systems as we work into the back half of January. And so to me, this is a warm interlude as we work into early to mid-January, and then right back to cold. To kind of break this down visually for you, our top 4 analogs for this particular period were 2000, 2014, 2017, and 2022. Wouldn't take any one specific year verbatim. It's the blend of the ideas of these years that I think show the overall progression. For the 6th to the 19th, which is our weeks 3 and 4 time frame, averaging out warmer than normal for much of the southern and central U.S. Now, no, I still think that you can be seasonable to slightly cooler. We have some blocking around. I think that the end of this period can end up cooler across the Great Lakes and towards the mid-Atlantic, but not notable cold, and probably some mild days in there. If we take a look at precipitation, I also don't think it's crazy active. You know, I think the Pacific Northwest can continue to run pretty active. You can get some moisture into the northern plains at times, but to me, this is not a pattern that is going to be super active. Probably some clippers across the northern tier of the United States, but other than that, I don't think this is a super active wintry period until after the 15th of January. And we reflected that here with our weeks 3 and 4 outlook. Here's our precipitation outlook, drier across the central part of the country, wetter to the north and kind of in the coastal regions. And in terms of temperatures, still favor things to average out slightly below normal in the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. But I do think that the rest of the country can average out warmer than normal. But what about beyond that? What about beyond that? If we take a look at these same analogs and roll it into the last 11 days of January, back third of the month, look at how cold they get. And I can tell you, I went through the individual years here, and 3 out of the 4 of them are very cold. 2000, 2014, 2022, they are very cold the last third of January. The only one that's not is 2017, but I do see some differences in what's going on with the tropical forcing down the road and the global wind state. And so that's a 75% chance that this cold outcome is going to happen. And those are pretty good odds. I feel pretty good about the fact that we dive back into a cold pattern the back half, the back third of January at the minimum. And it could be pretty cold. This is a pretty strong signal for cold. And in my opinion, with this type of a setup, it's going to favor snow systems even a little bit further south than normal. I would not be shocked lower Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, down through the southeastern part of the country, if there are some storm systems and some winter storms in here the back third of the month. In terms of how this all averages out for January as a whole, I think that these 4 analogs depict it very well. You know, again, a little bit of a milder period in here, but I think that if you're in the eastern part of the country, you probably average out colder than normal, especially if you're in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. Warmer the further south and west that you go. And I go back to the very first image that I showed you. Look at how similar that this is to where we've been over the past 30 days. You just can't ignore some of the persistence and the ideas that we're dealing with as we go throughout this winter. In terms of snow, here are what these analogs look like for snow. And again, guys, you can see an elevated signal for winter storm potential further south than normal across the lower Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, and into the mid-Atlantic. I do still think there are clipper systems to the north. It's not going to be bone dry, but less snowy across parts of the central plains. In terms of our overall outlooks, here's what we updated them to look like. We're going colder than normal. And you know, guys, the data, it's been warm. And some of the monthly and the weekly data is still warmer than this as we go throughout January. But the ideas so far and the analogs and the pattern drivers have been panning out like we thought they would. There's no reason to go against this idea right now. We've had this type of a look somewhat similar to this as we've gone throughout our forecast updates for January over the past several months. Not going to change it now. I think we're above normal with demand, above both the 10 and the 30-year normal. We average out colder than normal across the eastern part of the country, warmer south and west. In terms of precipitation, I think at times we can deal with some suppression, drier than normal. But with the storm track through here late in the month, I do think there's the opportunity for some bigger winter storms the back half of January for the Ohio Valley and up the East Coast. Guys, that's all I have for today's update. As usual, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.